I'm Alina Harper, 31 years old, and at my grandfather's memorial, while his ashes still sat on the mantel, my parents announced a legacy transition for the family tech firm. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. No thanks for the years I cared for him while they chased press headlines. No seat at the front. Not even my own last name was acknowledged. They'd decided I didn't exist anymore. But someone in that room still saw me, and together, we built something they could never control. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever felt erased by your own family, trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. I knew I didn't belong the moment I stepped into the room. My mother's eyes slid over me like I was a smudge on the wallpaper, and my father's handshake felt like a business transaction. It was my grandfather's memorial, Charles Harper, founder of HarperCore Technologies, the man who raised me after my parents handed me off so they could tour investor conferences and TED Talks. The man who built his company from a backyard soldering bench and a dream, who taught me how to code before I could legally vote, who trusted me, not them, when it came to his healthcare, his final wishes, and eventually, his pain. And yet, during the gathering at the Waterfront Community Center he helped fund, they announced the new leadership transition in front of 150 mourners and business elites. We're proud to pass on HarperCore's legacy to our son Troy, who will carry his grandfather's brilliance into the next generation, my mother said into the mic, voice soft with manufactured grief. Cameras flashed. Applause followed. Troy wasn't even in the country. He'd been in Bali for 6 months, finding himself, last I checked. He wasn't at the hospital. He wasn't at the bedside when Grandpa couldn't speak. But here he was, mentioned, applauded, glorified. I wasn't. Not a whisper of thanks. Not even a nod to the hours I'd spent managing Grandpa's meds, arranging hospice, or helping him record his final software blueprint, the one he said would outlive all of them. I stood next to the coffee table of tea sandwiches like a guest at someone else's story, invisible in a black dress borrowed from a friend, trying to keep my jaw from visibly locking in fury. My father made eye contact with me just once. He didn't blink, just turned to clasp hands with a potential investor. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I waited, quietly, like I had learned to do my whole life in a house full of speakers and no listeners. After the speeches ended, I stepped outside onto the deck for air. The sky over Puget Sound was steel gray and brooding, as if the weather understood me better than anyone inside. That's when Aunt Gwendolyn appeared. She never made a show of herself. Always on the sidelines, retired from her role as CFO years ago after a difference in values. She handed me a linen handkerchief I didn't need. You saw that, right? I asked, not even looking at her. The part where I ceased to exist? She let out a breath, long and measured. They're trying to rewrite history, Alina, but they forgot the part where you helped write the last chapter. I looked at her for the first time. She wasn't smiling, but there was fire behind her calm. You don't have to fight them, she said, but you can outlast them. That's a different kind of victory. I didn't answer. I just nodded once, because even then, I knew something had just shifted. The cut was clean, but it wouldn't be final. After the memorial, no one called. No one asked how I was handling the paperwork, the death certificates, the locked folders on Grandpa's encrypted server. Troy didn't even text. My parents flew to a conference in Zurich 2 days later, already angling to position HarperCore as the family-led future of ethical AI. Meanwhile, I sat in Grandpa's old house, alone, sorting through hospital bills and algorithms he scribbled on napkins during his final weeks. The man was still innovating with a morphine drip in his arm. But the version of history they were peddling now had no room for that story, or for me. Years before that day, when HarperCore hit its first plateau and the board pushed for a leaner strategy, my parents temporarily removed Grandpa from daily operations. He was furious, but not surprised. The company had outgrown its soul. He asked me to come stay with him for a little while, just until he adjusted. That little while became 4 years. I dropped out of my PhD program in neuroinformatics, thinking I could defer. I never went back. The stroke happened 3 months later. Then the surgeries. Then the isolation. My parents said, "You're handling things so well, Alina," while they closed boardroom deals and posed for magazine covers. Troy sent postcards when he remembered. But Grandpa and I, we worked. Even as his body failed, his mind was sharp. I read code to him when he couldn't see. I helped design interface logic for a neural lattice project he believed would revolutionize dementia support. Most of that research never saw daylight. When I asked about patents, he told me not to worry. "When the time is right," he said, "you'll know what to do with it." Those years weren't easy. I washed out feeding tubes. I cleaned up after seizures. I learned the difference between medical silence and emotional abandonment. And through it all, I coded at night, finishing the algorithms he dictated by hand. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. Not because I was hiding, but because it felt sacred. Like our final collaboration deserved privacy. My parents checked in twice in the first year. Then they stopped visiting entirely. Too busy. Too complicated. Too painful to watch a man they once admired speak in partial sentences. I wasn't bitter. I was busy surviving. But when the will was read, I understood exactly how deep the rewrite went. The house was left to Troy. HarperCore stock? All transferred into a trust under my parents' name. The only thing I inherited was Grandpa's encrypted external drive and a short note scribbled in a shaking hand. "Don't let them steal this too." That was the moment I knew they hadn't just forgotten me. They had chosen to erase me, rebranded the story with shiny press releases and timelines that conveniently skipped over the part where I held our family together. Not for applause, not for shares, but because someone had to do it. And they never thought that someone could one day stand against them. They forgot. I didn't. 3 weeks after the memorial, I got an email with no subject line, just 2 words. "Still building?" It was from Gwendolyn. Attached was a single file, a schematic I recognized instantly. Grandpa's Neural Lattice Framework, version 7. The last version we refined together before his hands gave out. She hadn't just remembered. She had kept it. Protected it. I replied with a question. "Are you serious?" Her response came minutes later. "Meet me." No parents. We met at a dim cafe in West Seattle, the kind of place tech VCs wouldn't be caught dead in. She wore a gray trench, hair in a tight knot, the same way she used to when she was HarperCore's CFO 2 decades ago. She pushed a flash drive across the table. "I left the company because your father started cutting corners, prioritizing hype over substance. Your grandfather didn't just resent that. He feared what the tech would become in the wrong hands. He gave me copies of everything, backups, and he made me promise I'd protect the one person who still gave a damn." "Me?" I asked, more incredulous than flattered. She nodded. "You were the only one who ever told him the truth, even when he hated it." She explained that after stepping away, she'd started her own small lab, off the radar, funded through old contacts who still believed in tech with conscience. No branding, no venture capital, no PR, just clean work and real progress. "We can build this right," she said. "Use the original framework. Use your code. Do what HarperCore can't, because they're too bloated to care." I stared at her, unsure. I hadn't touched anything since the will. I'd been buried in silence and grief and the taste of betrayal I couldn't scrub out. But this? This wasn't revenge. This was continuity. This was preservation. "What do you need from me?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Just be willing to make something better than what they stole." I slipped the drive into my coat pocket. I didn't promise anything. But that night, I opened Grandpa's final version, and my cursor hovered over the code like a scalpel. I didn't know yet what I'd create, only that it wouldn't have their name on it. Not this time. Gwendolyn's lab wasn't what I expected. It was quiet, unmarked, nestled in a repurposed dockside warehouse that smelled faintly of salt and solder. The floors creaked. The ceiling leaked in one corner, but the servers ran cold and smooth, and the tech, our tech, mattered. No glossy investor pitches, no LinkedIn press releases, just raw computation and hard-won breakthroughs. I started showing up before sunrise. At first, it was just the two of us, pulling code apart, running simulations, revisiting Grandpa's models with new eyes. My hands remembered how to move, even after months of silence. By the end of the first month, we had 4 more engineers. Quiet, brilliant minds Gwendolyn had pulled from underpaid teaching gigs and abandoned research fellowships. She gave them autonomy. I gave them purpose. Together, we built the spine of something new. We didn't call it a company. We called it Calyx, a nod to the protective part of a flower that shields new growth. Our mission wasn't to disrupt, it was to protect, enhance, restore. Grandpa's neural lattice model wasn't just about AI or data processing. It was about memory, about giving people with cognitive decline a chance to hold on to their sense of self. But where HarperCore wanted to license it to the defense sector, we took a different path. We built therapeutic applications, education tools, affordable accessibility plugins for public schools and elder care facilities. Within 8 months, we had a fully functional prototype. By month 10, we had a quiet partnership with the Seattle Public Library to test a user-guided memory retrieval interface for early-stage dementia patients. Gwendolyn handled the legal. I ran the dev teams. And no one, absolutely no one, knew I was behind it. Not even the press, who began to notice our breakthroughs. We funneled everything through a shell name. No Harper signature, no family fingerprints. My name didn't appear anywhere public by design. Every article that ran, every whisper that circulated about the mystery coder behind Calyx was a win. Because I wasn't after applause, I was after autonomy. Meanwhile, HarperCore stumbled. They kept pushing a glossy PR campaign for their next-gen legacy engine, which was really just Grandpa's older codebase with cosmetic changes and overpriced consultants. Their stock flatlined. Their demo at the Northwestern Innovation Forum froze live on stage. Code I had written years ago, modified without understanding its dependencies. They were mimicking a ghost. I was building the future. Then the opportunity came. The Oregon Department of Health issued an open proposal for an AI-assisted therapeutic tool to support memory care in underfunded facilities. It was the kind of project that had real stakes, real lives. HarperCore, desperate for a win, submitted their bid within 48 hours of the RFP release. I submitted Calyx's proposal 3 days later, under my name. For the first time in over a year, I stepped out of the shadow. I included clinical trial data, our success metrics, our human-first design. I signed every page. I didn't send it to Gwendolyn first. I didn't ask permission. I just did it. And when the state announced their decision, 2 weeks later, the press ran the headline I never thought I'd see. Seattle-based Calyx wins $22 million. State grant. Founder Alina Harper steps forward after year in shadows. They used my name. They used it everywhere. And when my mother forwarded me the link an hour later, no subject, just the word, why? I didn't reply. I just screenshotted it and saved it in a folder called Truth. It wasn't until the following spring that the family gathered again, this time for a private ceremony to unveil my grandfather's memorial plaque at HarperCore's new downtown headquarters. I wasn't invited. Not directly. The event was billed as a media-friendly celebration of legacy and vision, with Troy flown in just for the occasion, groomed in navy and polished back into the Harper Air image my parents were so desperate to preserve. But Gwendolyn had different plans. She still sat on HarperCore's dormant board, her seat technically never revoked, and she had the authority to make one final motion public. She emailed me 3 nights before the event. Subject line, time. I arrived wearing slate gray, no makeup, hair pulled back. Not to make a statement, but to stay invisible until the right moment. The ceremony was held in the building's new Founders Hall, all brass plaques and curated timelines. I stood near the back, behind a group of interns snapping pictures. When Charles Harper's tribute video ended, my father stepped forward to address the room, thanking attendees, praising his son Troy, and referencing the spirit of progress that runs in our family's DNA. I waited, watching him. His hands were steady, his smile choreographed. He didn't know what was coming. Gwendolyn stepped onto the stage beside him. She was deliberate, poised, holding a folder thick with documents. The air changed. I saw my mother's spine stiffen from across the room. Before we close, Gwendolyn said, I'd like to honor Charles Harper's final private directives, ones that were only recently authorized for release. A murmur swept the crowd. Charles may have built HarperCore, she continued, but his legacy was never meant to end with stock charts or stage-managed photos. It was meant to evolve. She turned to face the audience. Per the instructions outlined in this folder, notarized and sealed before his passing, Charles Harper formally designated his personal technology archive, intellectual properties, and majority voting rights within the Innovation Trust. She paused. To his granddaughter, Alina Harper. The silence hit like a detonation. My mother's face cracked first, a sharp intake of breath. My father didn't move. Troy, standing near the front, blinked twice, and looked around as if waiting for someone to tell him it was a joke. Effective immediately, Gwendolyn added, Alina will assume control of all legacy-based initiatives previously housed under the HarperCore philanthropic and research branches. These include current and future neural lattice projects and all derivative applications. Calyx will absorb these assets in full. I stepped forward then, slowly. Heads turned. Phones came out. My name, once buried, was now etched into stone. Literally. Because when the cover was pulled off the bronze memorial plaque, the engraving below Charles Harper's name read simply, Innovation isn't inheritance, it's responsibility. And below that, in smaller text, dedicated to Alina Harper, who showed up. They cornered me outside after the crowd had thinned. The 3 of them, my mother, my father, and Troy, clustered by the fountain in the plaza they'd once called ours. My father's voice was the first to break the silence. This is unnecessary, Alina. The foundation, the public reveal, none of it had to go this far. My mother stepped in, her tone sugar-coated with accusation. We could have worked something out privately. This spectacle, it's not you. I met their eyes one at a time, calm, detached. No, I said. It's not the version of me you curated, but it's the one that kept showing up while you disappeared. Troy looked at me, face unreadable. I didn't know, he said softly. I wasn't told. You didn't ask, I replied. You never once checked who was taking care of the man who made your life possible. That's not ignorance, Troy. That's indifference. My father's jaw clenched. We're still your family. I almost laughed. Family doesn't edit you out of history and then offer apologies when the camera pans back. You erased me. All I did was reappear. My mother opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised a hand. Not out of disrespect. Just finality. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not available either. You taught me how to vanish. I just learned how to do it on my terms. I walked away before they could respond, the weight of their words dissolving into the spring air. I didn't need vengeance. I needed distance. And I finally had it. The kind you don't measure in miles, but in boundaries drawn clean, firm, and permanent. That day, I didn't just walk away from them. I walked fully into myself, and I didn't look back. The first time I walked into Calix's new headquarters, a renovated ferry terminal overlooking the Sound, I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, present. A wall of windows bathed the space in morning light, reflecting off rows of desks where engineers, artists, and caregivers now co-created solutions no one else dared to build. A framed photo hung in the entryway, me and Grandpa in his workshop, his hand resting on a circuit board, mine guiding his. No awards, no titles, just memory. The kind that mattered. Outside, a class of middle school students toured the building for a workshop on inclusive design. One girl pointed at the glass-etched quote near the door. "Legacy is earned, not inherited." She asked who said it. "Someone who stopped waiting to be seen," I told her, "and built a place where everyone could be." That's how I knew I hadn't just reclaimed my story. I'd rewritten the future. At its core, the story of Alina Harper reminds us that betrayal from those closest to us doesn't just wound, it erases. And being erased is a unique kind of pain. When your own family pretends your sacrifices never happened, when your name is intentionally omitted from legacies you helped build, it can make you question your value, your identity, and even your reality. But this story also offers something rare, a roadmap not of revenge through destruction, but of restoration through reinvention. Alina didn't retaliate by attacking. She didn't beg to be seen. She rebuilt quietly, and in doing so, became impossible to ignore. The message here isn't about winning in the traditional sense. Alina's triumph wasn't just about inheriting a trust or reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming her voice, her place in history, and her right to define success on her own terms. The people who dismissed her, the same ones who edited her out of her own grandfather's story, were forced to watch as she built something stronger, more human, and far more enduring. The lesson isn't to scream louder to be heard. It's that some victories are whispered, not shouted, and those are the ones that echo longest. The story also shines a light on the difference between visibility and value. In today's world where performance often outweighs substance, it's easy to assume that whoever's most praised must be the most worthy. But sometimes, the real work is being done in silence. Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one holding everything together. And sometimes, walking away from toxic recognition isn't weakness, it's wisdom. For American audiences, especially those raised on ideals of individualism and merit, this story gently reframes the idea of legacy. It reminds us that what we build says more about us than what we inherit. That relationships based on image collapse, but those built on shared integrity last. This isn't a fairy tale. Alina doesn't get an apology that fixes everything. Her parents remain who they are, cold, calculating, concerned with optics. And that's real. Because not every betrayal ends in reconciliation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply draw a final boundary. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. How to get started today. Stop waiting for validation. Start that idea, that portfolio, that project, even if no one in your circle gets it. Write your own version of events. Journaling your truth can be a powerful tool to reclaim agency. Reconnect with those who saw you when no one else did. You might be surprised how many people quietly believed in you. Define your own legacy. Ask yourself, what am I building that lasts longer than approval? What about you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Or quietly built something after being underestimated? Share your story in the comments. Let's create a space where truth rises, no matter how long it's been buried. Like, share with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more stories of quiet power and family redemption.